Howdy, folks. This week, we're going to explore the power of portrait photography in telling stories that would otherwise be hidden from view. Today's guest has traveled the world to capture the evocative, dynamic, and complex lives of his subjects all over the globe, right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts, and before we get into it, I've got one thing to ask of you. I've noticed that over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel. Well, it's just not good enough. Come on, guys. You can really help us out by hitting the subscribe button. It'll help us get even more amazing guests on the show. It's just one click. It'll take a mere second. No time at all. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's give it up for today's special guest, the cultural portrait photographer, podcaster, pilot, and overall remarkable photographic artist. Give it up for Mr. Matt Jacob. Matt, man, how are things?
Good. Well, thank you for the introduction. It's quite flattering, but it's great to be here.
We finally made it happen. It's been a bit of a journey. Scheduling was difficult, but it's happening. So here, thank you so much for being on the show. Matt, give us a bit of a helicopter overview for the audience about what it is that you do.
I like to think of myself as a photographer first, more than anything. As you said in the introduction, my background is actually as a pilot for the last 15, 20 years or so. Photography I picked up while traveling, and it was travel that was the catalyst to pick up a camera, but more importantly, being interested in other ways of life, other cultures, other subcultures, cultures, and other ethnic groups, indigenous cultures. It really just fascinates me, as much as the other human across the street. So, look, I'm always looking for ways to connect and tell stories, which is what I really, really love to do. And the camera is such a great tool for that, and allows me to kind of break down those barriers and at least give me an excuse to go and talk to people or go and travel somewhere where I may not previously have traveled, or people I've spoken to. So, yeah, I do a podcast as well, and which I kind of my second love. I really love sitting across the table and talking to other incredible artists, and that's purely a selfish endeavor. I just, I want to learn. I want to, try and see through the eyes of someone else, and certainly people who've done so much with their photographic journey. So, photographer, podcast host, pilot, all of which I enjoy doing, and kind of jack of all trades, master of none. And I'm okay with that these days. I used to want to be the best at whatever I wanted to put my mind to, and now I just kind of enjoy the process more than anything. So, bit of everything, but I enjoy everything as well.
And you're based in Bali. Does that have anything to do with the fact that you're a commercial pilot, or how did you end up in Bali?
Kind of, yeah. So, my job led me to Hong Kong about 12, 13 years ago, and it was kind of our first, me and my wife, kind of our first introduction to living in Southeast Asia. And we took to it like a fish to water, and it was absolutely fantastic. Then COVID came along, and certainly in Hong Kong and China kind of put a huge dent in that experience. And Indonesia was somewhere I had traveled to a lot with photography over the last decade, or just holidays, actually, not necessarily photography. It's kind of on the doorstep from where we were living in Hong Kong. And it's the most diverse country I know of and have been to. And Bali was somewhere we got married. We took a shining to the local Balinese culture, not so much the tourist one that a lot of people see online. And so this was kind of a place we saw ourselves being able to set up shop if anything went wrong with our current situation when we were back in Hong Kong. And of course, COVID came along and really made us question, my goodness, can we really see ourselves long-term here if something like this happens again, or, if certain powers have the powers that they do and can control our life the way they did, to that extent, at least. So we we reconsidered, and it was a no-brainer for me. I've been wanting to move to Indonesia for a long time, and so it was kind of the pilot job, but also I had photography on my mind as well. It's such a mecca for photography, kind of whatever genre you're into. That was kind of the reasoning behind that.
Your love for Southeast Asia really comes across in your photography, which, by the way, if anybody who's listening or watching, I highly recommend go and check out Matt's website, mattjacobphotography.com. Your photography is absolutely stunning. What does it take to really get that close to your subject? Because what I love about your photography is the storytelling aspect. It's for us in the Western world, the world of Southeast Asia is still sort of steeped in that mystery, especially the kind of almost like untouched rural world. What does it take to get you there and create that kind of imagery?
Well, first of all, thank you for the compliments. I try my very best to do less but listen more. So if I have a location or a group of cohort of people that I want to, I guess, investigate's the wrong word, but to go and spend time with and see if there's a need to take some photos. That's really what it is. I've been so many places and I haven't been able to take photos because I haven't felt comfortable or they haven't felt comfortable. So 90% of the images is made from just me spending time with these people as much as I can without a camera in my hand. And so once that camera comes out, or at least once the conversation surrounding photos begin, they are at least at a level of comfort that isn't just stranger to stranger. Now, you'd have to live with these people for months to actually get to know them as human beings. You'd have to speak their language. You have to really immerse yourself, for months and months to actually truly understand who these people are. So, I'm not saying I do that at all. I would love to do that, but there is always this desire, and I'm sure you feel like this as a photographer. I want to get the image. I just want to get some great images. And that willpower to sit on your hands almost, certainly when it comes to portraits. And I teach this all the time. Like, just observe before you even think about shot. I mean, you can be thinking about, okay, this location is nice, or the light falls nice here, or this composition might be great. They have great feature, whatever it is. But you have to really observe. You have to really watch. You have to really listen and give them that emotional space to be comfortable with you. So that's really, it's not logistics. It's not having a fixer. They're all important, but they kind of come with the package. And so I put a lot of time and effort into that as much as I can. And then, on the day, it's the beauty of beauty of any photography is all curated, right? I'm not going to put images up that I don't feel have worked. But I have a lot of images that haven't worked. So, you may see my images on the website. I see some of my biggest inspirations, their photos on the website. Guaranteed there's 99 out of 100 shots they took that they're not happy with, or what their idea was didn't work, or, pertinent to your question, the subject wasn't comfortable or it didn't come through in the image. So it's an ongoing pursuit, and it's it's nothing to do with technical photography or anything that comes with those types of philosophies. So it's really just trying to factor time in with these people when you're planning your trip. For instance, if you want to go somewhere for 2 weeks or even a week would be, to get a good set of images in a week would be tough if you hadn't been to that place before. I'd spend 5 or 6 days just recce. Many times I've done a separate trip. This is just a recce, right? It's just a 1 or 2 week location scout, meet some people, get some contacts, think about how you're going to develop that project later on whenever you go back. So, 2 weeks for a portrait project is great. You spend the first week hardly with a camera in your hand and just getting to know the area, the people, making them feel comfortable. It could be a village or a town. It could just be, a whole region. right? Where you're traveling around, or it could just be one family. So, it's a lot of things like that that go unseen and untalked about, which is in pre-production essentially, so that when you actually get to produce those photos, hopefully you've done enough where they feel they can trust you. I think it's vital with portraits.
You mentioned the word pre-production. This is I'm a massive believer in really thorough pre-production, because it just solves so many problems further down the road. What's the planning project, the planning process like for any of your especially if your travel-based projects?
It varies. I mean, it can be really haphazard. It depends on a lot of things, but from concept to photo. Sorry, I should say from concept to being on location is a matter of months, and it's finding something that you are curious about. So it all starts from an idea, right? Like everything. It could be someone telling me, "Oh, you need to go to this place. This is right up your street," or it could be, seeing something along the travels, or most likely seeing something online, or maybe a podcast, right? There's a lot of kind of externalities that influence me, and where I'm really seeking something I haven't seen or heard before, just because I'm curious, A, why I haven't seen or heard about it, and B, there's just more beauty in that, in my opinion. So that's kind of where the ideas come from. And that's not to say I don't do things that I don't go to places that other people have, because that doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to have your own take on it, or you're not going to create something a little bit different, or you're not going to have your own experience. That's really what this is all about, right? Having your own experience that's memorable and hopefully impactful for other people. So yeah, that's kind of the concept process. And then it's just a matter of, okay, where can I find out the most information about this? Do I know anyone that knows anyone that knows, and anyone that's been there before, knows people there? And then the biggest issue I often have is finding a trustworthy fixer, because if you haven't been to a location before, the line between, I don't like to use success and failure, but like good and not good experience is fixer, because they are the fulcrum that puts everything together, especially when it comes to language, cultural differences, even cultural nuances, right? Stuff. I've made so many faux pas, even with fixers. It's crazy. So, a lot of research on my own, and then hopefully I can find a fixer who I can set up some meetings with and just chat about, so, do I need to know? And then often I love to try and do a recce, but a lot of the time I can't. It's expensive. It's time consuming. That's basically it. It's expensive and time consuming. But if I can, I will. But usually I'll factor in kind of a mini recce into the trip, right? Like I was saying earlier, if it's a couple of weeks, I'd love to go somewhere for a couple of weeks. I could spend those first 5 or 6 days doing that kind of recce. So, yeah, I mean, the internet is always Pandora's box, right? It's just that's where most of the research comes from, and then sometimes if that still resonates with me after maybe a month of sitting on it, then I know it's a meaningful endeavor, and I want to go and do it. So it sounds all very grandiose when I explain it, but it's just a natural thing that I'm reading about. I like to try and educate myself as much as possible anyway, so I'm kind of out there and reading and listening and trying to get as much information into my brain as I can each day and each week. So it kind of goes along with that. But yeah, the fixer is really the one thing that kind of puts all these pieces together. You can do as much research as you can, but it's going to take you 10 times as long to get the images you want or get to the places you want. And even then you don't know, because many times, certainly in my early days when I did these types of projects on my own, didn't even know a fixer existed, those types of people. I would go somewhere and then I'd come back and eventually somewhere down the line speak to someone who went with a fixer. Oh yeah, they showed me this little place, and they showed me these amazing people. I didn't know anything about that. So that, to get really kind of in there, fixer's so important, but a fixer can ruin it for you as well. So, I mean, for me as a kind of environmental portrait artist, I need that person. That's kind of a gamble at times. So I'll try and use people I've used before, or at least have them refer me. So that's a big part of the production process.
I mean, there's two things that come to my mind. First of all, how do you find a trustworthy fixer? And then also, talking about trust, I'm guessing, the fixer itself is crucial in actually building that trust between you and your subject or your potential subject.
Absolutely. So to answer your first question, I think I did a video on this a while back. It's really, really difficult to find a fixer because there's no website, there's no agency, there's no Facebook groups aren't really a thing anymore. I think there used to be fixer Facebook groups for specific locations, and any of them, it's you're just diving into something you don't know. So, I mean, you do online searches, and maybe there is a company that helps, or you go through guides. So like a travel agency will often have guides, right? Local guides who do tours. Now, tours, I hate tours. It's not for me. I don't want to do anything if there's a tourist within 100 meters of where I want to take photo, I'm not taking photo. It's just because it means it's kind of devalued in my brain. But these agencies can be great because maybe a guide can or can't help you, but if they can't, they might know someone, and often that's the case. Often I found fixers who aren't maybe official fixers, but they've worked with other photographers before who've been on like tours or photo tours or workshops or whatever it is. So a lot of it is kind of through that network, and it's just perseverance. And social media, as much as I hate social media, I put a lot of time into growing my account really for those kind of reasons. You can put up a story, and if you have a decent engagement, and not necessarily followers, I said engagement, then, you'll get people. You can put up a story and say, look, I'm looking for a fixer in this place, right? And that's where the platforms like Instagram can be really, really valuable as a photographer, because you can hopefully get some replies. It's like finding a model if you're a portrait photographer in a studio. Put out a story, it's free, looking for someone to collaborate. So social media, online search engines, travel agencies, travel guides, those kind of things, and other photographers in the photography community. So all the photography websites, you're bound to find something in all of those kind of groups.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps.
And to answer your second question, the fixes are absolutely pivotal. I don't think I could have got any of my favorite shots without a fixer. But what's important there is your relationship to the fixer, not necessarily the fixer's relationship to the people. So there has to be both ways. They are literally at the center of this circle of trust. And so, I've certainly in my early days where I wasn't as mature a photographer as maybe I am now. I'm still working on it, but I'd lose my patience if I didn't get what I wanted. Right? Photographers kind of desire, I need this, and I would lose the trust of the fixer. thankfully, I really hope I don't do that more. I don't think I do. Understanding that the fixer has to step very carefully and in careful places you may not be aware of, right? So talking to you earlier, like these cultural differences and cultural nuances and sensitivities that you may not know through 10 days of research online, right? So they are absolutely pivotal to gaining that trust of the subject. And then it's down to you, obviously, in the end. But certainly in non-English speaking countries, your technique and your trust and your relationship with the fixer is so important because you have to be able to communicate very, very, very well, but in simple terms, in case the fixer, often the fixer doesn't speak fluent English, he speaks very good English, but intention, tones, all the things that go into body language, all the things that go into communication is absolutely vital. So that's kind of hurdle number one, is your relationship with your team, essentially. And, with me, I'm traveling with an assistant as well, usually my wife, but sometimes not. And sometimes with a videographer doing BTS. So, managing all these people while thinking about how you're going to get these most amazing shots that you can, and managing the subject and managing the location and all that kind of stuff. It takes time to kind of practice that. But as you quite rightly said, the fixer is the most important person in that trust circle, for sure.
What really fascinates me every time I speak to somebody whose photography involves a lot of travel, in particular, on location shoots, is really how much planning goes into it. I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine, Dave Williams, who's a travel photographer who specializes in the Arctic and Northern Lights and so on. And it's I think I always used to have this idea that you just travel to a place with your camera, you take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves, and you just, sort of make sure that you're in the right place at the right time, and that's basically it. What I never really realized before that was how much pre-planning actually goes into a project like that. As you mentioned, it's not only the planning, it's also then assembling a team, figuring out what everybody does on location, shooting BTS, assisting and so on and so forth. Do you find that coming to a place like that with a team, does that take away a little bit of the sort of natural spontaneity of a place, or is that something you consider when you arrive in a particular spot?
Yeah, it does. It becomes more like an expedition, doesn't it, than a kind of trip or project. I do think about it, and again, I think the main antidote to that would be having as much time as you can to allow everyone to bed it, right? To allow everyone to find their feet, get over some jet lag if it's there, see the place. We'll just go spend the first few days leaving cameras at the hotel or camp or wherever you're staying. Excuse me. And just going out and seeing the place, right? That, we're there for the process and the journey and the experience as much as the photos, if not more. So hopefully that helps the team and me kind of just relax, not take things too seriously. In times I want to really take things seriously is when we're in the moment, we've got an hour of light to get as the best shots as we can. So yeah, I do think about that. It is something that I think everyone should think about. And again, just for me anyway, came with practice and just doing these trips, I love them so much for me, but understanding that everyone else is there because they're doing a job, not necessarily because they want to be there and take photos and hold lights and translate and all that kind of stuff. So definitely can take away from kind of the natural experience and spontaneity of things. But, my intent is not always to just be spontaneous with, while we're there. I'm a very deliberate and mindful photographer that I want to set. It's just my style. That's the way I do things. I write shot lists. I write mood boards. I I want to treat it like a story. I want to make sure there's a narrative. I want to make sure, we're hopefully mitigating as many issues as possible when it comes to timing and light and location, whatever it might be, technical stuff. So, the spontaneity thing for me anyway, for me inside, kind of goes out the door as soon as I leave home to get on the flight. That's not to say you emphasize the importance of research and pre-production, but things always go wrong, right? So, we can help alleviate those issues as much as we can by the pre-production, but knowing that, okay, when I need to be spontaneous and improvise, I know I'll have opportunity, or I know I'll be required to do that at some point, because there is no shoot that goes 100% according to plan. So, yeah, I'm aware of that, but hopefully, kind of the logistics and the things I put in place for these trips alleviate those issues as much as possible.
As you say, I mean, things always go wrong. I always feel that the more stuff goes wrong, the more of a learning experience it is, because next time the same thing goes wrong, you already know what the answer is. That's I invite things to go wrong in a sense, because then you can learn from that and fix it next time. And sometimes it's just an issue of, it might be a pre-planning, a planning issue, or it might just because it might be gear related, it might be just the wrong piece of gear that just didn't perform under those circumstances, whatever. Or it might just be something that, weather. That's, not much you could do about that.
Oh.
Most of the time.
So frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's like I mentioned earlier. I spent some time in northern Norway with Dave Williams. We were chasing the Aurora Borealis, and of course, it's totally weather dependent. If clouds come in, That's just basically it. And all you do is you chase holes in the clouds. What fascinates me with that is the amount of data points that you need to control to actually figure out where these opportunities are, across this string of islands. And if you get it right, you might get the shot, but it's a monumental amount of effort that goes into that, which again, fascinates me, because it's completely changed my mind or my thinking about what I thought travel photography actually was. Let's talk a little bit about equipment, because I'm looking at your images, in particular your portrait imagery, and I'm thinking, they're lit so excellently. How do you light it? You mentioned lighting gear. Do you take lighting gear on location, or is it predominantly natural light? What's your general process?
Yeah, so this is part of the I guess the production and pre-production as well. Just recapping on your point before about the knowing how much effort goes into whatever genre of photography. I don't think there's any genre of photography. Yeah, people probably, I can hear people typing now. Well, what about street photography? Good street photography. These guys are in the same location for hours, if not days, after day after day after day, trying to get the right person or right setup, or wait for that right moment. So that's the same thing, and I truly believe, like, we're just ignorant. We all are. It's just natural human behavior, ignorant of other, what travel photography actually, what goes into it. Just like what goes into sports photography, architectural photography, landscape photography. I don't do that, so I don't know. But I, know that all of that, there's a lot of work that goes into it before any shutter button is pressed. So I just wanted to kind of agree with you on that aspect, because I think people do misunderstand that, but that's part of the beauty of me. So when it comes to the lighting, that's just my style. I think I learned lighting for me is, and I know I sound cliche with this because all photographers say it, but it is just the essence of everything. For me as a portrait artist, if the light is not perfect, for my style, that is not, everyone has different lighting styles, and it's super fun and can be extremely creative with different lighting. But for me, in the images that I generally publicize, it's actually two lights. So one is natural light. I need sun. I don't use artificial light without ambient light. I'd say half of my photos are just ambient light. And then the other half are ambient light, depending on the composition, essentially, and what I'm trying to get in the frame. The other half is, again, mostly ambient light with a subtle pop of artificial light. So I take a softbox, I take a Profoto B10 Plus, and which is kind of a lightish strobe, light enough that my luggage isn't overweight, and take a softbox with me. It's smallish, it's about a meter diameter. Again, like I've experimented with bigger ones and smaller ones. Smaller ones don't do the light justice, and bigger ones can either not fit into luggage, or when you're on location and you're in a room, it's so cumbersome to move around. So kind of, you might see the one back here, that's kind of a meter wide. So it's about that size that I'll take away with me. Not that one, but similar size. And a light stand, and that's it. And a camera, one lens, so usually two cameras, similar lenses, and that's it.
Your images have a real sort of medium format look. So I'm interested to know how do you shoot them? What's your system?
Yeah, it's I shoot 2 Hasselblads. I shoot a secondhand H6D, which still cost me a fortune, but it was about 70% discount with the. I mean, they are just. I was obsessed with them for years and managed to save up money to buy a secondhand one about, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago now. And so I all my portraits are, I have that around my shoulder. I won't always use it. It's great it has an 80 mil lens on the medium format. So it's about 55 mil full frame. So it's kind of perfect for portraits, but usually like the focal distance is perfect for close-up portraits. So really kind of the cropped portraits. And then I had the I have the X2D, Hasselblad X2D, which is medium format, but it's technically medium format, but I don't call it full medium format. The medium format, I'm just talking to your audience here, medium format has 2 actually different sensor sizes, one proper medium format and one's just slightly smaller, in between full frame and proper medium format. And the X2D is that, and it's much lighter, it's much more technologically advanced, it has autofocus, it has still the Hasselblad color solution sensor, incredible sensor, much lighter, much ergonomically nice. And I have a 55 mil lens on that, which is about 42 full frame. So I could get slightly more of the environmental portraits with those and still get, exceptional medium format quality. So I kind of want to have that cohesiveness. That's kind of why I bought the X2D rather than buying a wider lens for the H6D, because it really is like, you've got to be in a very controlled environment to use that H6D, because it's very slow, very cumbersome, super heavy, and you've got to be in the right frame of mind and nail it each time. Whereas the X2D is, I could just slate around and I can get street, I can get landscape, I can do some environmental stuff. So I can even do video, which I don't, but so it's a much more versatile camera, but still has that medium format look. So that's my setup. And then if I'm with a videographer, I have a drone. I love some aerial stuff as well, just to provide extra narrative if I can from doing a series. Unfortunately, I broke my remote on my last trip, but I have the Mavic 2 Pro, Mavic 3 Pro. I don't know anything about drones. I just bought one a couple of years ago, and got some cool shots with that. So that's kind of my kit bag, plus the light. And then if I'm taking videographer, I have an R5, which I'm shooting on right now. Which I think the Canon R5. I'm a Canon guy. I used to be a Sony guy, but the Canon R5 is epic. I just think it's one of the best all-round cameras ever created, apart from maybe some low light issues and some video heat from video. But I'm hoping, they're bringing out the R1, but I'm hoping they're bringing out R5 Mark II soon. But who knows? They've sat on it for quite a long time. So there you go. That's my kit bag. That's kind of my go-to equipment.
There's, when you don't really have to look very far, like today in 2024, you can, the R5 is phenomenal. Nikon has some phenomenal cameras out there with the Z8 and the Z9. Well, the Z8 really, unless you want to lift a car. It's. Technology has come such. I mean, it's just I remember even from when what was it 4 or 5 years ago or whatever when Canon and Nikon first ventured into the world of mirrorless. I mean, there is worlds apart between those first, the first EOS R or the original like Z6 and Z7, which were pretty terrible, to now it's unbelievable. But what I really loved about what you just said was the whole thing about slowing down, because I sense that importance of slowing down massively, which is why I just sort of started dabbling with film, and in fact with medium format film. And there's a beauty in slowing down and not having every God-given function under the sun in your camera, and actually having to do things manually, focusing, metering, all that kind of stuff, which it just really, I don't know how to put that. It really connects me with my inner photographer almost, just the fact that you just can't just spray and pray and, get an image. And I think that's really something that I find that really comes across in your imagery, actually, is that sort of, I don't know, that slowness in the process.
Yeah, I think it's, I don't want to sound outdated here or controversial, but I think it's more important than ever as a society for us to slow down. We have inundations with social media every day, with phones, with notifications, and always just influx of stuff and crap that's going into our brain every day. And it takes a lot for us to deliberately slow down with that, deliberately turn notifications off, deliberately give yourself a certain amount of time on a certain application, or doing emails or whatever. It's really difficult. Like I know it's really difficult. But ever since, I don't know what it is about photography, ever since really day one, when I'd say probably one of the first workshops I went on when I was learning, to really learn, for me, to really, really like see a frame, to really connect with someone else who you're trying to take a photo of, right? And to really understand what's going on, but also to really enjoy the experience. Slow down. I'm the same as you. I've been shooting film for the last couple of years. Don't post any of it. It's kind of more of a personal side thing, and I just love the process. I love technical stuff. I love gadgets. I love gear. I love cameras. Show me an accessory and I'll get it. That's just one side of it. And when you think about the experience of photography, what you're trying to say with those photos, what your voice is, as much as your style, you have to slow down. You have to be mindful. You have to do what I call mindful photography, and not spirituality, just be mindful. So, why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I framing it like this? Why am I, setting these settings like this? What am I trying to say? What do I want the person to be doing? What do I want everyone else to be doing? There's so many things that go into photography. I think as soon as you start to spray and pray, you lose the beauty out of it. Yeah, you can probably get really nice images. Do they mean much into it? You're going to get much fulfillment from it, knowing that one photo out of 100 came through sharp or came through the way you wanted. It's like, maybe, but it's not for me. I just don't get much enjoyment out of that. I don't get much satisfaction from really thinking about, okay, what am I doing here? That could just be me. I might just be slow. I might just have a slow brain. But I feel like it's almost cheating when you get these, and like you mentioned, these amazing pieces of equipment these days. I'm not interested. It's great for business stuff and doing videos. it just doesn't, it doesn't bring any real natural beauty to the art form. And that's what we're really trying to talk about, I think. And that's what I like to talk about. Is like, well, how do we retain the artistic side of photography? What with AI, what with social media, what with, incredible pieces of equipment that are just going to get more and more and more and more and more advanced. How can we kind of retain the integrity of photography, not necessarily diminishing those types of photographers or photography, but just like that, for me, I want that process. I want that, that the sound of that shutter button to mean something, right? To me, like, okay, I'm now deciding to take this shot because I feel like, okay, I've got everything the way I wanted to get. So I hope there are more and more photographers who think about it that way. And with the trend in film photography, it's a great sign that people are wanting to just slow down a little bit. Yeah, it might be trendy to shoot some film, but it's such a different skill. I think for me, art only means something if a lot has gone into it. Whether that's, what you're thinking about, or what you actually physically do, or whether it's the research, whether it's the planning, or whatever it might be. Maybe it's the edit. But to put so much effort, thought, mindfulness, work, time, energy into maybe just one image, that it means more to me if that's kind of the process. So in order to do that, I think it's really important just to slow down. And the medium formats I realized that with medium formats, when you shoot medium format film, or when I got the H60 5 years ago, I had to slow down. I had no choice. If I was going to shoot that format, I had to slow down because I couldn't speed up. It was physically impossible to speed that camera up. So, if that's kind of the way I wanted my images to look and feel, then I had to learn to, be a bit more mindful and be a bit more deliberate with everything. And hopefully that comes through. If you look at some of the best photographers out there, they're not spraying and praying. They haven't, even when there are film cameras that have continuous drive. It's not, it's not exclusive to digital photography. But if you look at some of the best artists in the photography world over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, they're all mindful, right? They're all deliberate. They all did things slowly. Even when the digital cameras came in early 2000s, you could still take a few shots in a row. People, the real quality comes through, I think, when people think about things more. It's the same with everything, right?
Yeah.
That's why short form content is just crap, right? Most of the time, it doesn't help us really, because it's not really, there might be some thought behind the production. I'm guilty. I put reels up, but I want to hopefully put reels and short form content that gives value. But a lot of that content, there's thought and effort behind it. And, I think that's really only where value can come from, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's also a thing about you're creating a unique view of the world, through photography, which I recently bought a medium format film camera, like a Mamiya C330, which is a twin lens camera. It's a really beautiful piece of engineering. It's unbelievable. Who the hell engineers these things? It's because nowadays you open up. Yeah, I think I said this in last week's episode, but it's phenomenal. It's like you open up a modern day Nikon or Canon, whatever it might maybe, and it's basically computer circuits inside. With this thing, it's all like mechanics, cog wheels,
levers and cogs.
Levers. Yeah, it's bizarre. But the thing that really fascinates me with that camera, so the first time I opened it up was the viewfinder. It's unreal how bright that is. And also, it creates almost a 3-dimensional image. It's really bizarre. It's like watching a 3D movie. It's really very, very 3-dimensional. And it really creates a different view of the environment. Very, very, very different from looking through a digital viewfinder. Or even just, an optical viewfinder on a, I think in inverted commas, on a regular camera. It's a very, very different experience. And I've already realized how that will shape my view of the environment and how I take images and what I take images of. And it really, it's one of these experiences. It's difficult to, I think, I don't know, the best way to put it is like, sometimes things happen, in technology, like where, like, I don't know, maybe it's your first experience with Photoshop or digital post-production or whatever it is, or, moving from analog to film, from analog to digital or whatever it may be. But for me, like moving into that format on that camera, it's really, to me, it's been a massive step. Just looking through this viewfinder and seeing the world in that slightly different, in that different way. And that's really something I think that's immediately like triggered a whole bunch of like creative brainwaves in my head. That seems like I
think that's a really important. I think that's a really important point. Actually, we forget that photography, those images that you take, are an outlet of what's going on in your mind. It's not. You're not recording. I mean, you are, but you're not recording necessarily the external environment. You're recording like how you see the world, right? Which if you're not actually thinking about that and you're not actually seeing it in a different way, in that way that you want to express your voice, then what are you doing? Like, what's the point? Unfortunately, a lot of the point these days for people is just to get trendy images that will get likes and follows. But you're totally right. Once you look through a viewfinder and everything starts to slow down, especially with film, and you've got probably in that you've got 12 shots, 120 film, like you got 12 shots.
That's it.
Better get one of them right.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. And again, that's the beauty of it. It's like you can't, you really have to think very hard about every time you click the shutter. Plus, every time you click the shutter, it's like, it's like a dollar sign going like, ching, well, that was $2, whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a whole different thing. I'm going to Germany in a few days' time. I'm taking the Mamiya and I'm taking 2 rolls. So that gives me 24 shots. That is going to be it. And I'm going to limit it to that. So, but that is the beauty of, I think, of limiting yourself sometimes, because all of that technology nowadays, it gives us so many options and it's fantastic. But there's a time and a place to use that, or there's a time and a place to just sometimes just to slow down and actually there's a thing to like relying on your own skill as a photographer when you have to do the metering and you can't check it right away. You don't know whether the shot came out or not. Did you overexpose that or hopelessly underexpose that? Who knows? You're gonna find out in 2 weeks' time. When you either get the shots back from the lab or you've developed it yourself. And that's it.
I got a roll back from the lab. I got a roll back from the lab last week. It was all white. Hey, it's gonna happen. I must have exposed it to light somewhere along the line, or it got X-rayed. And I presume you're flying to Germany, and something else you have to think about film is the X-ray machines and all that. But look, it's simple economics, and don't necessarily want to really talk about film as if it's the answer or anything. But even with normal digital mirrorless camera, if you slow down and you give yourself, like you said, those limits, it's simple economics. Like if the demand is high and the supply is low, the price is going to go up. So it's the same with value. Like you're going to value those images more. You've got so much demand in yourself to get these photos. But if you're giving yourself 20 shots, 24, 30, 50 shots for a whole shoot, like you're limiting yourself. And if you can do that, I have to with medium format, there's, the light, wherever you are, you might have 1 hour of good light in the morning, you might have 1 hour of good light in the afternoon, whatever, depending on conditions, etc., etc. That's a limit. So if you have a camera that's naturally slow, or you put your own kind of speed on things, you're limiting yourself. That supply of photos is only finite, but you've got to get the right shot. So you then go into yourself and you start thinking about things more, and that's what it's all about. That's really where better art can come from. It's really where better photos can come from. Use your brain, be a little bit more mindful, slow things down, and start thinking And then all these senses come in, like, because you slow down, you're not like bang, 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 bang. You're just more aware of stuff. And, you also, if you're a portrait artist, you don't scare the subject because you're all the time. It's like, whoa, what's going on? Like, this is meant to be an encounter, not just a spray and pray kind of thing. So, there are lots of benefits from it. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but I honestly believe in that process as the best way to get, impactful and moving images.
And it's sometimes, that message is a little bit difficult to get through to some people because very often there's an emphasis on the post-production process. Like, you can basically take whatever image and then fix it, in Photoshop afterwards. Especially, it's even easier now with AI technology and everything else. But I think I can certainly speak from my own personal experience, but I think for a lot of people, there comes a point where you realize that the art and the craft, when it comes to photography, is actually at the taking stage. And this is the thing that limiting yourself can really enhance your own ability as a photographer, but it can also open up that door to creativity, because it's those limitations that will force you to think differently. And creativity is essentially that. It's thinking outside the box, thinking differently. I used to do that. I used to love doing that in a very simple way. Like, I shoot a little bit of street photography now and again with a Fuji X series camera. And the thing you can do there is you can set up sort of picture profiles. And it's a fixed lens. So this, you're limited to one lens right from the get-go. But then you can set up a picture profile, and I used to set up to, like, contrasty black and white. And I would go into London and spend a day just doing some street photography, but I would limit myself just to that. That was the only thing that I could shoot. And immediately you start seeing things differently. You're looking for shape, you're looking for light, you're looking for these opportunities. You might spend 20, 30 minutes just standing in one spot waiting for somebody to move through this, like, beam of light that you just discovered, And again, the process slows down. You come back with considerably fewer images, but it's like you said, each one of those images counts so much more. And Absolutely. Your skill as a photographer, has been enhanced because of it. And the next time that's again, from personal experience, I can say that the next time I do a commercial shoot, all of these experiences flood back in and create a sum of how do you say it? Like a sum of where the sum is greater than the individual parts, or whatever however that goes. But yeah. Now we've talked about your travel photography, but I also want to talk a little bit about your studio photography, because again, your studio portraits are really beautiful in the way that they are lit. What's your approach to studio lighting in particular?
Well, good question. I mean, it changes. I'm a one light setup kind of guy, and I'm still in the pursuit of mastering, a single light setup. So I will always start with a key light, usually 45 degrees lateral, 45 degrees vertical, to get some kind of Rembrandt lighting or whatever we want to call it on a subject's face. And that is like a go-to starting point. Where we end up can be 3 lights, it can be like tube lights, we can get really creative, depending on kind of if it's a model, what they want, as well as what we think, in terms of the concept, props, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, the orthodox and the kind of classic portraits, usually always one light. And if I need some hair light, or if I need some something to bring them out, the shadows behind, I will usually use a reflector or maybe a second light just to pop off the back of their head. So yeah, look, I'm very, very simple when it comes to the lighting. As long as it kind of gives me depth and 3-dimensionality to a face, the rest is done with the subject and your relationship with them. So that's kind of go to lighting. And yeah, we've got so creative sometimes in where we how we put lights and how, where they're coming from and stuff. And that's great fun in terms of experimentation. But even then, every shoot, I start with a light at the same place, because I think that's same with your equipment. But it's just for my own sanity and to let everyone know where they are, to let the subject kind of feel at ease. Okay, here's a store, here's a light. Let's just warm up, right? And then we'll see all of that time. I'll just see, okay, how they're reacting. They could be never had their photo taken before, or they might be an experienced model, in which case, obviously going in different directions. But the lighting, just one light setup, one light, one softbox. I'll try and make it as soft as possible. So, I have a big 1.5 meter softbox, but sometimes even in this studio, it could get too big and spray the light everywhere. I don't have a grid for it. So I usually start with one of these continuous lights that's on me now, and the one in the back. And just kind of go from there, add some layers of diffusion, make it really soft, and then, just see how it works.
Yeah, getting the subject to relax is super important. I mean, it's, the best lighting in the world won't help you create a good image if you don't have a relaxed subject.
It's really difficult.
It's difficult, yeah. It's a process, and it's again, I think a lot of photographers, especially portrait photographers, especially like headshot photographers, a lot of the time just focus on the technical, rather than the sort of psychological part of it. That means relaxing your subject, making them chilled out. Especially when you're doing something like when you're shooting like corporate headshots, for example. I mean, these people are not used to being in that situation at all. It's a completely unusual situation for them to be sitting in a studio with lights and somebody sticking a big camera in their face. And then you're not really going to get a decent expression out of somebody unless you can relax them, over time. So it's a never-ending quest. I'd say in portrait photography.
It is, and because humans are so complex, right? And humans can change from day to day. There are so many variables, and every shoot's different. So yeah, it's like you said, it's an ongoing process and pursuit, because no shoot's the same and no person's the same. So it's always that first bit of nerves, trepidation, anxiety, until hopefully you can break through. And again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, just earning their trust. That's super important. When you're in an enclosed environment like a studio, sometimes just you, photographer, and another human that you may not have met before. I mean, how fucking weird is that? Hey, come into this room and I'll shove a camera in your face. I mean, the concept of it is just strange. And once you see it from their point, I mean, we've all had our photos taken. Some may be not professionally in the studio, but it's never comfortable, right?
No, so it's totally weird.
Totally weird.
It's and even for actors, I found this. Often when I do headshots for actors, for example, it's a similar thing. And you think like, these people are used to being in front of cameras. It's their job. They do it all the time. But actually, they're doing a job in front of a camera. Like, they have dialogue, they have to act through a scene. They're not just sitting there most of the time. So actually, even for actors, having their headshot taken isn't as natural as you might assume. It still requires the same sort of process in order to get them to relax and chill out in front of the camera. And I think that's I always think of it this way. I think the most important skill for any portrait photographer is actually relating to the subject. It's that interhuman skill. The lighting, anybody can learn lighting. It's not difficult. Camera settings, nothing difficult about that, really. It's that building up that connection and that communication with the other human. That's the difficult part. And I think that's often that's what separates some portrait photographers from others. And and this is like anecdotal, I get that as a comment all the time. A lot of people are just not comfortable with that, and that's why they don't shoot portraits. But that's why they shoot landscapes. And that's
I get that. But yeah, and I get that portrait photography takes it to the next level. But actually, when you think about photography, and unless you're purely an individual hobbyist, all photography involves some kind of human interaction. Whether you're doing street photography and you're having to deal with strangers or get out of the way or whatever it might be, or it's even landscape photography. Well, you might be able to get up there on your own, but the likelihood is you're going to have some people around you at some point, and you're going to have to manage that accordingly. Or it's when you publish your photos, right? How are you going to deal with people that see your photos, whatever it might be, from beginning to end? You're going to have to interact and communicate and sometimes manage people. Yeah, they're not necessarily going to be people in front of your camera getting a photo taken, but I just think I think to be a really good photographer, you have to be good with people. You have to really be empathetic with people. And yeah, like I said, to some small degrees in some photography and larger degrees in other photography. But I think in order to connect with the world, which is kind of what you're trying to do as a photographer, then you have to empathize with the world, and you have to be able to connect to the people within it. And, often deal with them on a daily basis. You might have in which case you have to manage a team, or you have to communicate with the team, or you might have someone who does social media, or whatever it might be, but kind of whichever kind of part on the journey that you're on. I just don't see a journey of photography being without people in it. And so you have to, you have to be pretty decent at that, like I said, to some different degrees, but I just don't know if you can be a truly great artist without having some skill set with interconnecting to different people.
That's exactly, it's perfect how you just put it, to be an artist. I can completely relate to that, because I have exactly the same story really in music. I used to be a session musician before I went into photography. Mm-hmm. And I remember, one of the questions I used to be asked a lot is like, what does it take to be, successful at being a musician? And the thing is, like, the truth is, well, it's people skills. If you want to play in a band, you better be able to get on with other people. If you want to work in a studio, like in a confined space with an engineer and a producer and other musicians, you better be a nice person, because like nobody's going to work with you if you're an asshole. Basically, you do that once, exactly. And nobody wants to spend like weeks in a confined space with an idiot. That's just not. So yeah, people skills are super, super important, and often. And, that is absolutely true in music, and I think generally not. If you really enjoy working with somebody, you'll try and work with that person again. If you have a really good time, again, studio environment, you're stuck with somebody for a couple of weeks, like literally in a box of a room, listening to fairly loud music, trying to solve tons of problems. That's the other thing. Just as in photography, it's the same thing in music. It's like something goes wrong, you got to fix something. Why doesn't this sound like this? Oh, well, do we need to? What's wrong with this mic? Why does the cable? Why do we? Yeah, it's just one problem after another. And you spend a couple,
especially with audio.
Yeah, especially with audio. Yeah, exactly. But why does that guitar sound like that? Like, why is there no signal? Like, what is happening? Why is it? What's going on with the? There's like a million different failure points. In the whole thing. I guess it's a bit like a plane, fairly complicated, although if something goes wrong with a plane, I'm guessing the consequences are a little more drastic. There you go. Shit.
But
where is that wing?
It's a good analogy, because we are not in a place where we have single pilots, certainly fly commercially or privately. So you have to be able to I guess collaborate, but you have to be able to work with another human that's next to you. And I'm throwing statistics out here, but it's definitely I can't remember, but it's definitely about 70% of all accidents are human error. Now, human error with regards to what an individual did, not so much, but human error with regards to how those two pilots work together, or one is pissed off and the other one has a huge ego and they don't work together properly. I'm right. No, you're wrong. Blah, blah, blah. That's a fact. And so, we laugh, but it's actually a great analogy, because people are known in the industry as being good pilots or bad pilots, and the good pilots are people who have great people skills. They're able to be, assertive but not autocratic, are able to be flexible but not too, wishy-washy or pushover. So, I mean, there's so many, human behavioral traits that go into that. And that's really the essence of flying a safe aircraft. And, I hopefully I can bring that into photography as well. But podcasting's the same, right? It's like, we're talking to people. You have to be able to talk respectfully, politely, hopefully informatively and nicely and all that kind of stuff. So I believe the way we're going, it's needed more than ever, those kind of people skills. We're so used to conversing or communicating through the comment section that, we don't see, as one reason why I started my podcast. I don't know about you, but I just wanted to brush up on my people skills, connect, communicate, just like humans, right? So that goes into photography as well. I think, I see that with some of the best photographers out there. They just know how people work, and they're able to kind of dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about your podcast. How did you get started? What was the reasoning behind you starting your podcast, the Mood podcast?
Yeah, community. It was literally the start of COVID, so we're talking early 2020. I'd been in Hong Kong by that time 7 years, and I've been doing photography. Maybe, there's no start time I started photography, the rest of us, but I mean, maybe 3-4 years. Just kind of learning my way through it. And I felt this huge chasm in the community. I didn't feel like, hey, why is the photography community so individual? Why is it so standoffish? Every other kind of industry, they have communities, they have groups, they have, whether it's work functions or sports clubs or music club, whatever it might be. There's photography clubs, but at the end of the day, everyone's like, they don't really want to share too many ideas. But this is what I found anyway. In the preceding few years, I realized it wasn't necessarily true. But in order to kind of break down those walls and try and connect with other photographers, and really self-referential, just me wanting to learn, I started to do Instagram lives. I don't think Instagram live is a thing anymore, but at the time, 4.5 years ago, I was just basically reaching out to other photographers on Instagram, saying, I just want to chat for hours. And I was doing these Instagram lives and realized that I actually quite enjoyed this. It was a reach out to other photographers so I could maybe get some information and learn their process. But actually, the conversation part of it was something I really enjoyed that connection and that conversation that we had. And so I kept doing that and trying to kind of be better interviewer stroke conversationalist and try and kind of dig into the deeper philosophies of why photographers do what they do. And then, it kind of went from there. When we moved to Bali 2 years ago, I wanted to make it, a proper podcast, a studio-based thing rather than just an Instagram live chat. So that was always in the plan. If we're going to move here, I want to rent a studio. Serves two functions. I can practice photography and I can also practice conversation. So that's how it came about. And look, I'm releasing the 50th episode tonight, and I'm super proud that we've got to 50 episodes. Still learning. I don't know about you, but learning so much along the way about how to talk, how to research, how to produce, how to fucking fix audio, how to publish, distribute, write. You've got to have writing skill. There's so much goes into it. I love all of it. And so I'm still learning a lot, and hopefully the 50th episode is just a springboard to many, many more.
Yeah, it's massive. Congratulations to 50 episodes. It's again, given that the average podcast's lifespan is 7 or 8 episodes or something like that. Hitting that 50 milestone is an awesome achievement.
Yeah, 90% of podcasts don't reach 5. I thought it was 5. It was somewhere. It's less than 10.
It's something like that. Yeah.
Which is a crazy stat. Yeah, absolutely crazy stat. So yeah, I mean, we are both in that kind of 10%, I guess. And it's like anything, as long as you enjoy it, you can push the noise aside and keep doing what you enjoy.
Yeah, and I think that's always the thing. I've said this many times on this podcast, and it's also something that sort of echoes in conversations that I have with other podcasters, for example. This is just simply the fact, if your motivation is going viral on TikTok or on Instagram, within the first 10 episodes, that is absolutely not going to happen. Like, the chances of that happening are virtually zero. So, so you have to do it for another reason. So, if your motivation is, well, I'm just doing something that I really enjoy doing, then you're more likely to stick to it, And of course, it makes perfect sense. We know this. That's just, from as far as human behavior is concerned, it makes sense. Like, we know that kids will stick with a particular sports club or playing a particular instrument if they really enjoy doing it. That if you as a parent force a kid to play, to play the violin and they don't enjoy it, they're not really going to stick with it for very long. I know this. I've been teaching music for a long time. It's like,
oh, okay.
It's one of these things. But, if we all know, intrinsically, if we enjoy something, we just keep doing it and we're more likely to stick with it. And so, I think podcasting is the same. If you get the right motivation, the right motive, then it's actually relatively easy to get to 50 episodes, because it's just a fun thing to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I definitely haven't found it easy. So I'm one of those guys that, it's found it probably more difficult. And the editing part is certainly in the studio episodes, it's a big deal, and it takes a lot of time. And thankfully now I have an editor who works with me who can, take a lot of the load off. But, even that, I love putting the things together at the end and seeing the final product. So yeah, it's of course, it's like you said, with music or anything in life, if you're able to like truly do it for the right intent, truly do it because you just enjoy it, then nothing else matters, really. I think nothing else matters. Unfortunately, it's full of trends. Podcasting is trendy these days, and then that's fine. But you won't continue with it unless you absolutely love it.
Yeah, exactly. And seeing that the statistics say, if you're just doing it because it's trendy, you're probably not gonna last past episode 7. Then that's fine.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's a self-rectifying problem in many ways. But yeah, so tell us a little bit about the Mood podcast. What is it about? And you already mentioned it's a studio-based podcast.
Yeah, it is. We were, at my studio here where I'm stood in Bali. So, it's a photography first podcast. So, I want to kind of dive into the minds of fellow photographers, much more in a kind of philosophical and self-development, I guess, rationale behind what they do and why they do it. So, we don't talk too much technical stuff. We talk about, definitely opinions of the way the photography world is, philosophies behind how they do what they do and where they go and what they're interested in, and their inspirations and how other people are shaping what they can do and see and create. Social media always comes up, because it's such a prominent kind of topic in photography. It's part of our life now, whether we like it or not. Definitely in the photography world, if we want to really kind of get our images and work out there. So, we have to deal with it, just like AI. And now they're intertwined. I saw, Instagram has now a made with AI label, and they can automatically sense if you've used generative fill and all that kind of crap. So, it's such a fast-paced industry, fast-paced world, but with, like we said earlier, with cameras coming out literally every week and new software. But I think every time I open up Lightroom Photoshop, there's an update. It's insane. I can't keep up with it. And so, I just want to sit across from another photographer and hopefully he can share my trepidation and my anxiety and, just kind of connect and empathize on that level. So yeah, it's a lot about that. I've started kind of looking at other creators and writers and even musicians and people who kind of wear a few different hats, filmmakers, quite a lot of filmmakers. So kind of in the visual arts or the art space. So I realized that photography may be too niche, certainly here in Bali. And so, I want to try and, I guess, cover the insights and the minds of other types of artists as well. But we'll see. We'll watch the space. I can't get everyone here in Bali, so I do have to do online episodes as well, which is not the same. It's still really enjoyable, as has this conversation been. But it's just I don't know if you have that kind of thought at all, but I love sitting across the table and kind of chatting with someone and don't even know the cameras are there. It's just it's a joy. So hopefully I can do more of it.
Fantastic. Matt, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for being the guest on this week's episode of the Camera Shake podcast. Absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a joy.
Okay, folks, that's it for today. It was fantastic having Matt on the show. And just, remember that all of his socials and website details and everything are in the description below. So if you want to check out his stuff, then you can find it there if you're on audio. However, if you are on YouTube, then you would have seen those images flying. So if you're interested in seeing those whilst you're witnessing the conversation, or whilst you're listening to the conversation, I highly recommend you head over to YouTube for that. And as always, before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you'll like. Check out episode 181 with Dave Williams. I'm sure you'll love it. If you enjoy our content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/CameraShake to help us continue creating and bringing you more exciting episodes. It really does mean the world to us. And for those of you who are listening to the audio version of this podcast, I mentioned it just a second ago. Did you know that there's a fully fledged video version over on YouTube where you can see our guest photography in full Technicolor? Well, now you do. Anyway, all you have to do is go over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you'll be able to watch all past episodes on there. And if you're already on YouTube, well, drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring that bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach a wider audience all over the world. So thank you for listening and watching. And remember, new episode drops every Thursday, so make sure you mark that in your calendars. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.